It all begins with a flashback of our protagonist, Kousei Arima, where we see him playing the piano in front of a large audience during a piano competition. Suddenly, this flashback fades, and we are shown the present, where we see Kousei in the music room of Sumiya Municipal Middle School. He is calmly going about his business when suddenly a baseball knocks him out. This baseball was hit by his classmate and childhood friend, Tsubaki Soabe, an enthusiastic athlete who belongs to the baseball club. Because she got so excited when she hit the ball, not only did she injure our boy, but she also broke the music room window, prompting Kousei to start picking up the glass shards to clean up the mess. Tsubaki stops him as she doesn't want her friend to hurt his fingers while trying to pick up the glass. This results in the two of them holding hands, giving Ryuta Watari, a mutual friend, the perfect opportunity to take a picture of them to tease them about being a couple. A little later, due to the accident with the music room window, Tsubaki is reprimanded by the school principal. Fortunately for her, Kousei and Ryuta kept her company so that the three of them could walk home together. On the way, the group begins to reminisce about the good times they had during their childhood, laughing as they walk home. Ryuta is the first to leave, as he received a call from a girl he likes, leaving our protagonist and Tsubaki alone. They start talking about love, something unfamiliar to Kousei, as he believes no one could ever fall in love with him. Hearing this, his friend scolds him, telling him not to sabotage himself because she is sure that some girl will fall in love with him in the not-too-distant future. Once the protagonist arrives home, we see that his house is completely dark because his father is away on a business trip, and his mother has though to him, she will always be alive in his heart. Delving into Kousei's story, at the moment when he was playing the piano in front of thousands of people, he couldn't help but cry over losing his mother at such a young age. And from that moment on, he stopped playing the piano because it reminded him of her. The next day in class, Tsubaki talks to Kousei to invite him on a group outing to introduce him to a girl who plays classical music. Although this piques his interest, he tells her that he has no intention of getting involved with anyone related to music, as since losing his mother, not only does he no longer play the piano as he used to, but his life has become a complete void without any meaning, and the only thing he can do to fill that void is to play the piano, not for pleasure, but for work. In the same way, Kousei ended up accepting his friend's proposal, so the next day they meet at the rendezvous point for the group outing. He is the first to arrive, and since he doesn't see any of his friends around, he decides to take a short walk around the area. While doing this, he becomes fascinated when he sees a blonde-haired girl playing music to entertain some children. What's impressive about this is that the girl's music encouraged the children to play along with her, resulting in a sweet musical scene in front of the protagonist's eyes. Because of this, he wants to capture the moment by taking a photo of them. However, everything goes wrong when a sudden strong breeze exposes the girl in a way that someone could take advantage of, and as she noticed Kousei was taking a candid photo of her, she thought he was taking a picture, so she didn't hesitate to scold him for acting like a complete. When Tsubaki and Ryuta arrive on the scene, Tsubaki approaches the blonde-haired girl to introduce her to her friends. The girl steps forward and introduces herself as Kaori Miyazono. The first to introduce himself to her is Ryuta, and he does so in such an egocentric way that the girl is almost smitten with him. When it's our protagonist's turn, Kaori introduces herself more harshly, as she will never forget how he was with her just moments ago. Due to this introduction to Kousei, Tsubaki believes that Kaori will hate him forever and even thinks that the girl will end up with Ryuta since she seems very attached to him. But this doesn't seem to be entirely the case, because then the girl tells them she has to go play at a place called Tawa Hall. As it turns out, she's a violinist and the competition she's participating in is about to begin. The whole group of friends considers going with her, but the protagonist doesn't want to since, as we recall, he doesn't want to be involved with music in any way. Upon hearing this, Kaori doesn't hesitate to grab the boy's hand to force him to enter Tawa Hall, and with this simple act, he is completely shocked, feeling something for a girl for the first time. Once the group of friends enters the venue, Kaori separates to prepare for her performance. Meanwhile, the rest of the group enters the auditorium to wait for the girl's presentation. At this point, our protagonist can't help but feel nervous, as this is the same place where he played the piano several years ago, and to make this moment even harder for him, the girls present recognize him and start talking behind his back. However, he doesn't pay attention to them because he came here just to see Kaori. Minutes later, the competition begins, and the first contestant is a young man with black hair. He does a good performance that impresses everyone, including Kousei, but at a certain point, he starts to get nervous, causing his violin to fall out of tune with his accompanist's piano, something our protagonist notices, which also makes him nervous. Due to this small mistake, the judges disqualify him and call the next participant. This is where Kaori enters, and her friends can't help but feel very excited. Kaori starts by playing the same piece as the previous contestant, which is Beethoven's Kreutzer, just as he did, meaning calm calmly and following all the notes of the piece. But suddenly, everything changes as the girl immerses herself in her world and begins to play her own notes, falling out of sync with her accompanist's piano, which angers the judges for not following the notes of the piece. However, the audience likes this new interpretation of the piece, especially the protagonist, who is fascinated by the girl, as despite her bad temper, he recognizes that she knows how to reinterpret classical pieces, leading him to feel a certain affection for her. At the end of her performance, the girl is exhausted but happy to have played Beethoven's Kreutzer in her own way, and fortunately for her, the entire audience loved it, so they stand up to applaud her, especially her friends, which makes her more than happy. On the other hand, the judges didn't like what Kaori did, so they firmly decide to disqualify her. During the competition's intermission, Kaori is the talk of the town, including among her friends. Her performance was so masterful that some girls give her flowers to congratulate her. At this moment, one of the judges informs her that within 30 minutes the other judges will give their final verdict on the competition. However, she doesn't care as she didn't come to the competition to win, but to make people happy, especially her friends. After this, Kaori approaches them to ask what they thought of her performance. Ryota responds that it was incredible, while Kousei becomes nervous and thoughtful about what to say, but in short, he tells her that it was so wonderful that some strangers gave her flowers. These words make the girl more than happy. The next day at school, our protagonist gets hurt trying to play basketball, so he hides in the music room. Ryota arrives to help him with his injury and talk about some things. Ryota mentions to the protagonist that he seems quite distracted and assumes that this distraction is because he is thinking about the girl he likes, meaning Kaori. Kousei denies that his distraction is because of her, as he lets him know that she would never be interested in someone like him, especially knowing that she seems to be interested in his friend. To this, Ryota says it's normal for Kaori to be interested in him, as almost all the girls are after him since he is very popular among them and has enough love for all of them. Unfortunately for him, this shared love among many girls only brings him problems, as suddenly Tsubaki arrives in the room to scold him for playing with one of her classmates. After classes, Kousei returns home, thinking about how fascinating Kaori looked during her performance in the Tower Hall competition. At that moment, he meets her on the way, and seeing that she is wearing his school's uniform, he is shocked as he had no idea she went to the same school as him. When she notices him, she calls him by his nickname, Friend A, and asks about Ryota since she's planning to go out with him. In response, our protagonist lets her know that his friend will be staying late at school, so he won't be able to see her. This leads the girl to decide to name Kousei as Ryota's substitute to accompany her and spend some time together. In this way, the protagonist spends time with Kaori at a cafe, enjoying some delicious desserts that fill the girl with joy, while the boy watches her very contentedly. Then, Kaori notices two little girls playing the piano, so she approaches them to try and join in. Since the girls aren't very good at playing the piano, Kaori forces Kousei to help them. Thus, the protagonist, Kaori, and the two girls start putting on a small musical performance in the cafe, playing the famous song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star by Mozart. Our boy gets so excited that he starts playing the piano solo, and he plays so well that everyone in the place watches him in amazement. But after a few seconds, he freezes and stops playing for no apparent reason, leaving the audience with a bad taste in their mouths. This leaves Kaori intrigued, so after leaving the cafe, she asks the boy why he suddenly stopped playing the piano. He responds that he did so because he has a childhood trauma, as his mother demanded that he play the piano perfectly, which made him forget the sound produced by the notes he plays. Although he can hear the initial notes, when he starts to get excited and play the piano with passion, his ear becomes unable to hear the sound of the keys. This isn't a serious problem, as this trauma only affects him in the musical field, but the problem worsens when Kaori decides to name him as her accompanist for the second round of the violin competition at Tower Hall. Obviously, Kousei has no intention of returning to play the piano professionally, so he runs away from Kaori as fast as he can, so she won't catch him and force him to be her accompanist. However, this isn't enough, because when the girl tells Tsubaki about her situation, she is willing to help her, and together they pester Kousei by placing the sheet music for the song Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso everywhere he goes, like the music room, the classroom, his locker, and even his own house and phone. Despite all this, the boy stands firm in his decision and doesn't give in to the girl's pressure. They, for their part, feel sorry for having Kousei, though Tsubaki not as much, since she wants her friend to play the piano again because she wants to see him succeed in life, as she knows he has the talent and vocation for the piano. Not only that, but she also notices that it's something he's passionate about, and that's why she wants to see her friend playing the piano again, even if it's forced. The next day, Kaori goes up to the school's rooftop, where she finds Kousei, so she doesn't hesitate to rudely ask him to be her accompanist. The boy responds no, but not because he doesn't want to, but because he can't, as he feels incapable of helping her since he believes he will play the piano so poorly that it will cause her disqualification. Also, ever since he lost his mother, he has no reason to play on his own, as his mother was the reason he played the piano, and since she left this world, he has no one to play the piano for, let alone anyone to be his lifeline if he freezes while playing. playing. Hearing this, Kaori understands the reasons why the protagonist can't be her accompanist. However, the girl asks him one last time to be her accompanist, but this time she does it differently, as she cries inconsolably while letting him know that she will be there for him if anything happens to him during a performance in the competition. She also lets him know that it doesn't matter if they end up disqualified as long as they have fun on stage. Thanks to these comforting words, the boy agrees to be her accompanist, although he tells her he won't take responsibility for any mistakes during the performance. This makes Kaori more than happy to have convinced the protagonist to be her accompanist. But then, Tsubaki and Ryuta burst onto the scene to teach Kousei a lesson for not wanting to be Kaori's accompanist, unaware that the boy had just agreed to do so. When Tsubaki and Ryuta finally find out that the protagonist has agreed to be Kaori's accompanist, they don't hesitate to help them get to Tower Hall as quickly as possible, as the competition will begin in less than 30 minutes. Riding their bikes, the group of friends heads to Tower Hall, and once they arrive, Kousei and Kaori enter the building, while Tsubaki and Ryuta stay outside chatting for a bit before going in. As Kaori's turn to perform approaches, our boy becomes extremely nervous, to the point where all he does is repeatedly go over the sheet music for Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso. Kaori notices this and, unable to watch him like that, decides to give him a good smack to get his attention. She tells him that he doesn't need to try too hard, as she's confident they'll give a great performance because she knows he's good at memorizing sheet music. When it's finally their turn to perform, Kaori takes the boy's hand and leads him to the stage. Along the way, she reminds him to try to enjoy the music without worrying too much about perfection, since, after all, music is an art form, and its composers and scores aren't perfect. On stage, Kaori's performance begins, and everything goes well, despite our boy overthinking the situation due to his anxiety about making a mistake. The performance continues smoothly, with both of them putting on a good show, but at one point, Kousei looks at the audience and notices the silhouette of his mother, causing his anxiety to skyrocket to a catastrophic level, leading to the very thing he feared, losing the ability to hear the piano keys. As a result, the boy becomes extremely anxious, but this anxiety is dangerous as it leads him to make a critical mistake, hitting the piano keys in a way that throws off Kaori's performance, causing the audience to start speaking poorly of him. Realizing that he's not helping Kaori, Kousei decides to stop playing to avoid hindering her performance, but to his surprise, she also stops playing, refusing to leave him behind. With determination, Kaori looks at Kousei, waiting for him to understand her signal, and then she begins to play the violin again. Shortly after, the protagonist joins her, but he's still struggling with the same anxiety that prevents him from hearing the piano keys. Remembering his past, the boy recalls a wise piece of advice from his mother, which was that if he played the keys gently, the piano would respond firmly, while if he played them with force and anger, the piano would respond with rejection. Thanks to this memory, the boy is able to stop overthinking for a moment and focus solely on the piano keys. This leads to a great impact on the audience, who watch intently as the protagonist plays the correct notes. The downside is that Kousei becomes so focused on playing the piano well that he ends up stealing the spotlight from Kaori. When she notices this, she tries to put more effort into her performance. This clash between the two catches the audience's attention, as even though they both play well and harmonize, it seems they're competing to be the star of the performance. Once they both finish the song simultaneously, the audience applauds their great performance, and everything seems to have gone well for Kaori. But for no apparent reason, she collapses on the floor, unconscious. That's why the next day, we see her in a hospital where her friends visit her. They ask if she's okay, to which she replies that she is. However, she's upset with the protagonist because she believes her f***ing was a result of chasing after him and insisting he be her accompanist. Because of this, Tsubaki and Ryuta side with Kaori and give Kousei a little lesson. The boy doesn't defend himself because he feels guilty for Kaori's but he feels even more guilty for having caused her to be disqualified from the Tower Hall competition. This guilt is so overwhelming that the boy feels uncomfortable being near Kaori, thinking that she hates him. Even when Ryuta invites him to return to the hospital the next day, Kousei refuses, feeling too guilty for having caused Kaori's and her disqualification from the competition. As a result, he runs home, replaying the competition performance in his mind. Despite everything going so well that the audience enjoyed it, he can't forget the moment when Kaori collapsed, something that will weigh on his mind for the rest of his life. On the other hand, Tsubaki and her classmate Kashiwagi walk home after a friendly baseball game. They have a brief conversation about childhood, during which Kousei's name comes up. Kashiwagi can't help but notice that her friend's expression changes when she mentions Kousei's name, so she asks if something's going on between them. Tsubaki gets offended and denies feeling anything romantic toward him. Just then, the boy appears. It's Seitu, the captain of the baseball team and idol of all the girls on the team. Seitu asks to talk to Tsubaki in private, so she is forced to say goodbye to her friend. Once Seitu and Tsubaki are alone, they walk home while talking about their lives. After some small talk, Seitu gets to the point and confesses his love, which takes Tsubaki by surprise. Although she had feelings for him in the past, she now feels nothing more than friendship, which leaves her unable to give him a clear response about how she really feels. Days pass, and while our boy is on his way home after school, he runs into Kaori. Upon seeing him, she approaches and asks him to give her the gift he's carrying, thinking that Kousei brought something to apologize for making her and for causing her disqualification from the competition. To her disappointment, the protagonist isn't carrying anything, so she doesn't hesitate to scold him and cry in front of him to guilt trip him into showing her some compassion. This tactic works so well that Kousei decides to give her a gift, which is that he will do anything she asks of him. After achieving her goal, Kaori gets excited and asks him for one thing: to participate in a piano competition. Kousei refuses because he knows he can't compete out of fear of making mistakes, and because he doesn't consider himself a great pianist. In response, Kaori encourages him by saying that he doesn't need to be a great pianist to participate. It's enough for him to have fun on stage, setting aside perfection in sheet music. Shortly after this, she off the bridge into the river to show him that he doesn't have to be stressed about being perfect at playing the piano. Seeing her into the river, Kousei can't help but admire her free spirit because she doesn't let what others say or think affect her. Since this also applies to music, the boy feels like a great musician next to her, so he the bridge into the river, and they both end up laughing at this strange but fun moment. On a new day, Kaori is at the protagonist's house, determined to help him enter the piano competition. When she discovers an old piano at his house, she gets so excited that she opens the curtains to provide Kousei with a better practice environment. In doing so, Kaori sees Tsubaki across the street, and Tsubaki, seeing that Kaori is wearing the protagonist's clothes, can't help but overthink the situation. This leads her to become so angry that the next day she channels all that anger into practicing for the upcoming baseball championship. On the other hand, Kaori insists on continuing to help Kousei enter the competition by giving him the sheet music for a piece called Etudes Op. 25, number 5 E minor by Chopin to practice all afternoon. The boy worked hard practicing, but for Kaori, it's not enough, so she reprimands him whenever she can. The boy accepts this, seeming not uncomfortable with her harshness, as he knows she's doing it for his own good. What doesn't sit well with Tsubaki is Kaori's harsh treatment, as she feels the girl is pushing a boy who is terrified of the piano after a traumatic event. In response, Kaori explains to Tsubaki that it's necessary for Kousei to overexert himself in piano practice, not only to learn from his mistakes and avoid making them in the competition, but also to release all the burdens of the past and be free to play the piano with nothing but freedom and happiness. Despite saying all this, Kaori feels some remorse for pushing Kousei too hard, which is why, after saying goodbye to Tsubaki, she visits him to apologize for forcing him to play the piano without considering his feelings, knowing how much he suffers every time he plays since his mother. Ironically, the boy tells her that there's no need to apologize, as although she was the one who pushed him to participate in the competition and practice piano, he chose to do it despite that. Deep down, he wants to play the piano again like he did before lose his mother. However, this isn't enough, as the protagonist still can't play the piano well, no matter how much he follows the sheet music. For this reason, Kaori suggests they take a good break outdoors. They go to the schoolyard to watch the baseball championship, where Tsubaki is about to play. Seeing them together makes Tsubaki feel a bit jealous, which leads her to overthink things excessively. This causes her to make 2 strikes, leaving her with only 1 chance to hit the ball before being out of the game. Luckily, she manages to hit the last ball and run all the bases. The problem is that while running the bases, she starts to overthink again, this time about Kousei, as she refuses to accept that she's in love with him. Before reaching the final base, Tsubaki stops paying attention to her friend's advice and focuses solely on her feelings for the protagonist, which unfortunately leads to her being disqualified by the opposing team when she reaches the final base, causing her team to lose. Not only that, but she also ends up with a hurt foot. Fortunately for her, our great protagonist carries her on his back all the way home. On the way, he tells her that she can count on him for anything, as even though he feels useless, he will always be there for her in both good and bad times. At these words, Tsubaki can't help but cry, not only because of the boy's sincerity, but also because she feels responsible for her team's disqualification from the championship. Despite this, she feels strangely at peace, as Kousei brings her a sense of calm that can only be found with the right person. Continuing with the championships, it's now time for the soccer championship, where Captain Ryuta is a participant. Recently, the boy kicks the ball towards the rival team's goal, but unfortunately, he fails to score. As a result, his team is disqualified from the championship. Although Ryuta appears happy accepting the defeat, he secretly cries inconsolably for having made his team lose, blaming himself and promising to put in more effort in the next championship. On the other hand, our protagonist is practicing the sheet music for the piano competition he will participate in. The boy focuses solely on this, completely forgetting about his surroundings. As a result, during physical education class, he trips and falls unconscious to the ground and is taken to the infirmary. When Kaori finds out about this, she rushes to visit him, only to be surprised that the boy is in perfect condition, as he merely had a relapse from being distracted in physical education class. After this, the two return home, alone, and they see a black cat. Kousei starts to feel unwell and collapses on the ground. Kaori helps him by taking him to a nearby bench. Once they sit down, the boy feels compelled to reveal to Kaori why he felt ill upon seeing the cat. It turns out that in his childhood, Kousei had a black cat similar to the one he saw a few moments ago. This cat was his pet, and he loved it dearly, but because the cat unintentionally injured his hand, his mother was forced to separate it from him, as her son's hands needed to be very well cared for to play the piano properly. Hearing this story, Kaori feels sorry for making the boy relive that bitter memory. However, she lets him know that his mother did well in keeping the cat away, as hands are everything for a pianist. Additionally, she touches his hands and expresses her willingness to heal them when they are hurt, as this is something a good friend like her would do. The next day, Kousei goes to the competition venue, and upon entering, he encounters two old acquaintances. They are Takeshi Eiza and Imai Egawa, two pianists who were Kousei's main rivals in the past, now back to compete against him again, not just to beat him but to defeat and him, as they have been envious of his great piano skills since they were children. Ironically, Kousei does not recognize them, as he has never had contact with them in his life. This raises Takeshi and Ima's anger to the maximum, as they cannot accept that Kousei, the best pianist they know, does not know of their existence, while they know and even detest him. Moments later, the competition begins, and the participants present themselves one by one. When it's Takeshi's turn, he becomes very nervous, knowing that everyone is watching him since he won a major competition the previous year with the possibility of traveling abroad. Despite feeling very nervous and afraid, the boy presents himself and prepares to give a good performance. Not for the public, but for himself, since although he won a major competition with the possibility of traveling abroad, more specifically to Germany, what he really wants is to defeat Kousei just once, to prove to himself that he is as good a pianist as Kousei. He can't stand that the protagonist has beaten him in every piano competition since they were children. Takeshi's performance leaves everyone impressed, from the judges to the audience, including the protagonist's friends. Takeshi has a good control of his hands on the piano keys, producing a pleasant sound that is different from the previous participants. At the same time, this makes him appear to be the perfect pianist to everyone, and precisely because of this, when his performance ends, everyone applauds, and his fans go wild for him. Although Takeshi gave a magnificent performance, he felt nervous and very scared, which we can notice when he takes a break after his performance as his fingers are trembling. At that moment, the young man encounters his rival, Kousei. Seeing him, Takeshi asks what he thought of his performance, to which Kousei responds that it was magnificent. Upon hearing these words, Takeshi is surprised and cannot help but feel very flattered by his rival. Later, it's the turn of the last participant, Imai. She wears a red dress and walks towards the stage. During this, she begins to recall the past, as her dream of being a pianist was started because of Kousei. Although she wants to defeat him at least once in some competition, she admires him, not only for playing the piano well, but also for enduring all the whims and demands of his mother to become a perfect pianist without flaws. Once Imai reaches the stage, she sits down and prepares to start her performance. She begins by playing the keys very softly and with a slow rhythm to intrigue the spectators. Soon after, she starts playing in a more forceful and faster manner, which leaves everyone, including the protagonist, speechless. As Imai performs, Kousei notices that she plays emotionally, meaning she plays from the heart. The curious thing is that her emotions are not precisely the best, as both the young man and Kaori notice that Imai's emotions are anger and sadness. These emotions lead Imai to give a very good performance, better than Takeshi's. Once she finishes, she is applauded by the entire audience except Kaori, who cannot help but wonder why Imai had feelings of anger and sadness during her performance. Focusing on Imai's past, we can observe that the first moment she saw Kousei play the piano, she realized that she wanted to be a pianist when she grew up. That's why, from the top of a playground structure, she promised herself to become a pianist no matter what. As a result, she had to discard all her toys, distractions, and other hobbies just to focus on the piano. Her mother agreed and helped by taking her to a renowned piano teacher named Yuriko Ochie. Although Imai was very bad at playing the piano at first, like any pianist, after focusing on her goal of matching or surpassing Kousei, she committed herself fully to learning to play the piano without fear, which led her to the present moment where she gave her all in her piano competition performance. After her performance, Imai leaves feeling upset. When she comes face to face with the protagonist, she grabs him tightly to say some harsh words, but since she is very tired and feels that her performance spoke for itself, she doesn't see the need to talk to him, so she leaves and goes to the bathroom to regain her energy. Minutes later, it is announced that it's the protagonist's turn, which makes him very nervous as he doesn't feel at the same level as Takeshi or Imai, who gave great performances. But despite this insecurity, the protagonist is determined to go on stage and give his performance, whether it goes well or badly. Before taking his seat, he looks at the audience and sees something that reminds him of his past. Kousei sees a young Tsubaki holding a stuffed cat, which leads him to recall the day she came to visit him to play. That day, he couldn't go out because he had piano lessons with his mother, but what's stood out was that the young Tsubaki had bruises all over her arm, something that caught Kousei's attention, but she couldn't do anything because Kousei's mother shouted so loudly that it scared her. Besides recalling that day, the protagonist remembers that all his efforts in piano were to help his mother feel better in terms of health. As for her, his achievements were the best medicine. As a result of these words, Kousei promised to always come in first place in all piano competitions. In the present, the protagonist begins his performance and everything goes very well, as he plays the keys correctly, and everyone in the audience is watching him attentively. The trouble starts when he suddenly recalls the promise he made to his mother when he was young. This promise led him to always follow the sheet music to the letter, knowing that if he didn't, his mother would be very disappointed in him, to the point that she wouldn't hesitate to physically push him to make him a good pianist for her. It was at that moment that Kousei grew weary of his mother's. So he threw the sheet music with all his strength and then told her, from the bottom of his heart, that he wished she would leave this world as soon as possible. When this came true, Kousei didn't show sadness, as he could only think about the next competition he would participate in. Despite showing sadness during his performance in the competition he participated in as a child, he cannot stop thinking about his mother, as he is certain that being out of tune during his performance is a punishment from his mother. This affects him in the present, as while giving his performance, he starts to lose the sound of the keys, causing him to play out of tune, something that everyone in the audience notices. Kousei is out of control, as he still cannot hear the piano notes clearly. They come through confusingly. Despite this, he continues playing, and then the shadow of his mother appears to tell him that everything he is experiencing at this moment, his anxiety, fear, and trauma while playing the piano, is a punishment from her for not fulfilling her dream of becoming a pianist. The presence of his mother in his mind causes Kousei to continue playing the piano incorrectly until, eventually, he gives up, knowing that he will never be able to overcome the trauma his mother left him, and he stops playing the piano. This disqualifies him from the competition, so it no longer makes sense to continue playing. The young man looks towards the stage light and sees a light of hope, Kaori. He remembers the time she was disqualified for the same reason in the violin competition at Tower Hall. As he wonders why she continued playing after being disqualified, he realizes that the only reason he is now on stage in front of a lot of people is because of her. As a result, Kousei starts playing the piano again, realizing that the true reason he wants to play the piano is for Kaori, as she brings him peace, happiness, freedom, and above all, a great friendship. As he plays, people begin to notice a significant change in his playing, as it is now more moving. Imi, for her part, cannot help but recall the same sunflower she saw when she heard Kousei's emotional performance during his first interpretation as a child. On the other hand, Kaori realizes that the protagonist is playing as well as before, causing tears to start streaming down her face. Meanwhile, Kousei continues to think about Kaori and the conversations they had, hoping that this new performance will reach her heart. Before the piece reaches its end, everything becomes magical, as Kousei is surrounded by a large blossoming tree, representing his new bloom. After his performance ends, the audience is confused, not knowing how to react to the young man's complete interpretation. He is not concerned about this, as the only person he is waiting for a response from is Kaori, and she, to the young man's fortune, is deeply moved as his performance touched her heart. After this, the competition ends, and the young man exits the room. In the main hall, he encounters a woman from his past. It is Hiroko Seto, his late mother's friend. Hiroko greets Kousei with a big hug, which catches the attention of his friends. None of them know who this woman is, but Kaori recognizes her, as Hiroko is a famous pianist known nationally. The hug from this woman is nostalgic for her, as all she can think about is how much the young man has grown since she last saw him 2 years ago. Before leaving, Hiroko asks the young man if he will go to see the competition results, to which he replies that it is not necessary, as he knows he was disqualified for pausing his performance. Nevertheless, she encourages him to go, so when she says goodbye, Kousei goes to check the results. He is not surprised not to see his name on the list of selected candidates, but Takeshi is. Despite having placed first, Takeshi intercepts Kousei to ask why his performance was so embarrassing. The protagonist responds that he did everything he could and practiced a lot for the competition, and if he did poorly, it's because he is now just a young man with emotional issues that affect his piano playing. The only positive aspect of his performance was that he finally found a good reason to keep practicing the piano, which is Kaori, though he doesn't explicitly tell Takeshi. After saying all this, the young man leaves, leaving Takeshi speechless. Imi, for her part, notices that the young man has matured and changed his way of being, as he now plays not to be the best as his mother had instructed him, but for enjoyment and to make others happy, as if he were a child. The next day, Hiroko and her young daughter visit Kousei's home, and upon entering his room and seeing him completely unconscious, they become worried. But then, the young man suddenly wakes up, startling them. It turns out that Kousei stayed up all night practicing the piano, just like when he was a child. This surprises Hiroko, as she was sure he would never play the piano again after last night's performance. He tells her she isn't completely wrong, as he also didn't believe he would play play again, but someone changed his mind. Later, on the school rooftop, Kousei reflects on what to do when the vacation starts. Kaori interrupts his thoughts by telling him he needs to practice the piano because both of them have been invited to perform a gala concert at Tower Hall. Because of this, the two meet later to decide on the piece they will play, and Kaori suggests playing Love Sorrow by Chrysler. Kousei finds this piece unremarkable and even boring, so he asks her to choose another song. She refuses, believing that the song she chose is perfect for standing out among the rest. Because of this, the young man gives up on insisting, as he fully trusts Kaori, knowing that she always gives any piece a special touch with her unique way of playing the violin. By evening, the two head home. Kaori notices that Kousei seems demotivated, so she cheers him up by showing him some fireflies, explaining that life is continuous and nothing lasts forever. But as long as a person's light shines brightly enough to illuminate others, that person will always live in the hearts of others. After this, the girl asks the young man what inspired him to continue playing in the piano competition after being disqualified. He directly responds that his only motivation to keep playing was her, as he wants to become a musician with a total freedom to express his notes as she does, and he hopes she will be by his side throughout that journey. Although this makes Kaori happy, she feels a bit sad inside, knowing that people don't live forever, no matter how much their music lives on in others. The next day, our protagonists begin practicing for the upcoming concert at Tower Hall. Kousei is unable to concentrate and play well, so Kaori gives him a lesson and asks what's wrong. He responds that the song she chose, Love Sorrow, does not sit well with him because it reminds him of his mother, both the good and the bad. As a result, the young man becomes melancholic and locks himself in the room with his piano to release all the pain he carries from his mother. Hiroko interrupts him, and seeing him in this state, decides to take him to a festival to change the atmosphere. There, Hiroko lets him know that his mother always loved him, even though he treated her badly in her final days. She also mentions that if he is unsure whether he should continue playing the piano, the best thing to do is to keep playing and not overthink it, as fear and anxiety paralyze a person. But if that person confronts their anxiety and fear, they can move forward in life, overcoming any obstacles and past traumas. On another day, Kousei and Kaori return home after practicing all day in the school's music room. On their way home, they look at the sky and start singing the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. When they arrive at Kaori's house, the young man prepares to leave and go home, but this is prevented by Kaori's father, who, in an intimidating manner, scolds the protagonist for bringing his daughter home so late. However, when Mr. Shimizu realizes that the young man is none other than Kousei, the pianist known throughout the music world, he treats him kindlier and even invites him to eat cakes from his shop. Days later, the long-awaited day of the concert arrives, and Kousei finds himself in a major predicament. Kaori is nowhere to be found, and despite Ryuta's calls to her phone, she does not answer because her phone is at her father's shop. Because of this, Kousei and Hiroko decide to enter Tower Hall to ask the organizers for a bit more time until Kaori arrives. One of the organizers responds that the extra time must be requested from Meek, a boy who is the last on the concert list. Since Meek won a major competition last year, this year he is scheduled to close the concert with his brilliant performance. Hiroko kindly asks the boy to give up his spot so that Kaori and Kousei can play, but despite this, the boy refuses as he wants to be the star of the concert and does not want anyone else to close the show. Understanding this, Hiroko steps back, but before leaving, Kousei apologizes to the boy for making Hiroko ask such a request and tells him that whether he likes it or not, he and Kaori will be the stars of the concert. As a result, when it's time for the protagonists, the only one to go on stage is Kousei, as Kaori has still not appeared, which worries their friends. In a flashback, Kousei hears Hiroko playing the piano. She is playing Idiot Husband because she had a fight with her husband. After explaining her romantic situation to Kousei, the young man begins to imitate Hiroko, playing Idiot Husband in a more relaxed and playful manner. This caught the girl's attention, and she did not hesitate to tell the boy's mother that her son is a genius and will have a great future as a pianist. Back in the present, our protagonist begins his performance without Kaori. Although everything starts off poorly due to Kousei playing the piano keys in a rough and uncontrolled manner because of his anger from Meek's words, sooner or later a sense of peace comes to him when he remembers that his mother used to play Love Sorrow for him. This memory makes him realize that she was not a bad person as he had believed, since everything she did for him was to make him a stronger person for the future, to help him deal with the emotional pain of disappointments and obstacles. She did this because she had little time left to live, and although she put him through difficult times to prepare him for adult life, she would have loved to enjoy happy moments with him. All these memories cause Kousei's performance to take a complete turn, and the audience becomes emotional as each person starts to feel the music from the young man in their hearts, filling them with a great sense of peace. Once his performance ends, the protagonist gets up from his seat and stands in front of the audience, waiting for their applause. Although they do clap, the young man does not show excitement, as all he was waiting for was the applause of his deceased mother. After leaving the stage, Kousei collapses in the hallway due to the immense sadness of not having his mother in this world. Fortunately for him, Hiroko and her young daughter accompanied him at this important moment, and with a warm embrace, the woman assures the young man that wherever his mother may be, she surely heard his magnificent performance. These words finally allow Kousei to release all the pain he has been carrying, crying inconsolably in Hiroko's arms. After this, the young man finally feels at peace, though he still feels a bit of anger and resentment that Kaori abandoned him on this important day for both of them. Ironically, while the protagonist's anger is justified, what he did not know is that Kaori could not attend the concert because she had a relapse and had to be urgently hospitalized, something he only learns the next day from Tsubaki. So, Kousei, Tsubaki, and Ryuta visit Kaori in the hospital, where Kaori explains that the reason she couldn't attend the concert was because she and hit her head so hard that she had to be hospitalized. Fortunately, she is now much better, and even more so knowing that she has good friends who brought her a lot of gifts, with the most notable being various books that Ryuta brought exclusively for her. This makes her both happy and sad, as she knows she won't be able to read them all in a short time. On another day at the hospital, the protagonist visits Kaori to be with her despite the big festival in the city where his friends are having a good time. Kaori notices that he seems uneasy and even anxious, so she makes a joke about how incompetent he was at the Tower Hall concert, as he was the only participant who didn't play with his accompanying violist, meaning her, since she was ill. She teases him that he played alone just to be the star of the concert. In response, Kousei tells her that this is not the case, as he played for two reasons, his mother and her. He played from the depths of his heart to overcome the trauma he had with his mother and to make peace with her in his mind. He also played because Meek, the prodigy child, spoke badly of Kaori, which motivated him to play with fury and resentment towards him to show that Kaori is a true musician and that she matters a lot to him, and it would hurt him to lose her just like he lost his mother. In a flashback, we see several scenes where a young Tsubaki tries to play with Kousei, but he refuses because he is obligated to practice the piano. This leads young Tsubaki to become disheartened in her friendship with the boy, to the point where she starts to hate music because it took him away from her. This affects her in the present, as although she has feelings for Kousei, she is dating Seitu. As a result, her friend Kashiwagi asks Ryuta to talk to Tsubaki and make her realize that she is making a mistake by dating Seitu without loving him. Ryuta refuses to help Kashiwagi because he knows he cannot interfere in matters that do not concern him, and it is only a matter of time before Tsubaki herself realizes her feelings for Kousei. In the evening, while Tsubaki is returning home, Kousei surprises her by approaching to see how she is, as Kashiwagi mentioned that Tsubaki was going through a crisis. In response, Tsubaki tells him that nothing is wrong, she was just thinking about her feelings for Seitu, but it is nothing serious. To relieve the tension, they buy an ice cream and hum a beautiful song while walking home, just like old times. Then, Kousei reveals something important to Tsubaki. After finishing school, he will be studying at a music school far from the city. This news surprises Tsubaki, and she doesn't hesitate to run away from him with tears in her eyes, remembering all the wonderful moments they shared since they were young, moments overshadowed by music. Just as in the past, Kousei distanced himself from her for piano practice, in the not-too-distant future, he will distance himself again to practice piano professionally. This makes Tsubaki see music as her worst enemy, as it has separated and will continue to separate her from the boy she loves. Tsubaki's feelings for Kousei are so strong that she can't look him in the eyes. Every time she sees him, she runs away. This reflects a reality she doesn't want to face, as she doesn't want to accept that she has been in love with Kousei for a long time. When Seitu notices this, he decides to break up with her, which breaks Tsubaki's heart, but not because she was deeply in love with him. It hurts her because she made him waste his time with her, having led him on throughout their relationship. In the evening, Tsubaki plays the piano in the music room to comfort herself, as she needs Kousei's comfort, but since he is not there, the only thing left of him in the room is the piano. To her surprise, the boy suddenly appears to keep her company, having heard from afar how poorly she was playing the piano. Kousei starts playing the piano in a relaxed and carefree manner, without saying a single word. In response, Tsubaki asks him if he doesn't plan to speak to her, to which he replies that he is waiting for her to release all the pain she has inside. She reveals that Seitu broke up with her simply because she used him, and it hurts her because she can't stand having used someone to fulfill a need. In this case, the need for affection from from someone important in her life. After sharing this, Tsubaki reprimands Kousei for not offering any words of comfort, telling him to do whatever he wants since it doesn't matter to her whether he is present to console her whenever she needs it. In response, Kousei promises that no matter what happens, he will always be by her side, and although he may not be able to console her as she wishes, he will be there for her in all her tough times. Tsubaki doesn't believe him, as she knows Kousei will soon be studying far away and therefore won't be by her side as he just promised. The next day, the protagonist is outside the hospital where Kaori is. He is unsure whether to go in or not, as he saw several things outside that made him think it was a bad idea to enter, such as a black cat and a crow. Additionally, he is attacked by water balloons coming from a mysterious place, although he soon realizes that the balloons are being thrown by a girl who fell from a tree. Consequently, Kousei decides to take her to Hiroko's house, and once she wakes up, she is very happy to see Hiroko, as she is her fan. The girl introduces herself as Nagi, a student from a prestigious music school and a novice pianist. Upon seeing Hiroko, Nagi begs her to let her be her disciple, something Hiroko is not keen on. However, she gives her a small test to see how good she is at playing the piano. Nagi plays the piece Etudes Op. 25, number 5 E minor, the same piece Kousei performed at his last competition. The girl plays the piano so well that she impresses both Hiroko and Kousei, although the latter notices that she plays with a lot of roughness and fury, as if she hates something or someone. After finishing her test, Hiroko agrees to be her teacher, which suits her well as she had an ulterior motive for this entire show, which remains unknown. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Kaori is walking through the corridors when she suddenly loses her balance and falls. She tries to get up but cannot, as her legs don't respond, which causes her to have a panic attack. Despite her efforts to stand up, she cannot do so because her legs remain immobile, leading her to cry uncontrollably and let out a loud cry of pain. This brings us to the day of the concert, when Kaori, before heading to Tower Hall, was practicing at home when suddenly her legs stopped working, causing her not only to fall but also to hit her head so hard that she lost a lot of and was rushed to the hospital, where she has been ever since. On the other hand, our protagonist was forced by Hiroko to be Nagi's piano tutor. He doesn't hold back any comments and is very strict in his role as a tutor, even though he is teaching a young girl. Besides pointing out the things Nagi needs to improve, he also teaches her how to improve her posture and the way she plays the keys. Interestingly, Kousei noticed a drastic change in Nagi's attitude. While she played with anger, after hearing his advice, she appeared more spirited. Later, after classes, Kousei returns home and encounters none other than Kaori. She reprimands him for not visiting her in the hospital, and now that she has him in front of her, she decides to take him to the mall to spend time together. After a long afternoon at the mall, they prepare to go home, but something happens. Kousei notices that Kaori is wearing her school uniform but doesn't have her backpack. He asks her where it is, and she responds that she forgot it at school, so they both return to school to retrieve it. Once they are in the classroom, Kaori starts looking for her backpack but cannot find it anywhere, as she actually didn't attend classes that day. What really happened is that the hospital nurses gave her a day off so she could go out and enjoy herself rather than being stuck in a hospital bed. The boy is moved, so he takes her back to the hospital, happy that he could at least see her that day. She in turn is also delighted to see him, and her joy is so overwhelming that she can't help but cry, wishing with all of her heart that time would stop so she could spend more time with Kousei. The boy feels Kaori's tears but doesn't dare ask her about them. Days pass, and our protagonist continues his role as Nagi's piano tutor, and every time she makes a mistake, he reprimands her and points out what needs to be corrected, which annoys the girl to the point that one day she gets so angry that she runs away and hides in a temple. When Kousei finds her, he tries to comfort her by offering her a sweet and listening to her express herself in any way she wants. Nagi tells him that the main reason she wants to be better at piano is to impress a boy from her school, a somewhat immature reason but very fitting for her age. To her surprise, Kousei also plays the piano to gain someone's interest, Kaori, because she was the one who reignited his desire to play after overcoming the trauma of his mother. This revelation from both of them marks the beginning of a better relationship as they enjoy a pleasant afternoon playing rock, paper, scissors. On another day, Kousei and his friends visit Kaori in the hospital, and she gets angry with him for two reasons. First, for not bringing her sweets as he had promised. The second reason is more serious. She found out that he is giving piano lessons to a girl. This leads her to become very upset, to the point that she scolds him for it, advising him to practice the piano more instead of teaching the girl, as there is a competition coming up in the next few months. Due to Kaori's outburst, everyone remains silent, so she feels compelled to apologize for her behavior. The next day, while Nagi practices at her school, she reflects on the conversation she had with Kousei, which leads her thinking all the way home. Both have similar conflicts with the piano, as they play for a similar reason, the attention of someone. While he plays to gain Kaori's attention and love, she plays to gain Kousei's attention as she secretly admires him, but at the same time hates him because she is the sister of none other than Takeshi, Kousei's eternal piano rival. In the evening, the protagonist visits Kaori, but senses a strange vibe from her. He notices that Kaori is resembling his mother in her last moments of life, which is confirmed by her outburst with him in front of his friends a few days ago. The boy knows that his mind is playing tricks on him, making him believe that Kaori is in her last moments just like his mother was, but fortunately, he manages to push this thought aside, feeling confident that she will recover. The downside is that she notices that the boy is overthinking and appears worried. This is why she asks him a strange and confusing question: "Would you take your life with me?" This question left Kousei bewildered, but Kaori reassures him that it was nothing more than a simple joke. Even so, the boy remains quite worried to the point where he can't focus either in class or while playing the piano at Hiroko's house. Nagi noticed Kousei's sadness, so she decided to comfort him by saying some kind and reassuring words, but she didn't do it just to console him. In reality, she did it to keep him motivated because she doesn't want to see her piano rival weak, as that would mean an easy victory for her and Takeshi. The next day, Ryuta plans to visit Kaori in the hospital, so he asks Kousei if he wants to go with him. Our boy refuses, and despite his friend's insistence, he keeps saying no over and over. It reaches a point where Kousei throws himself on the ground and starts crying, telling Ryuta that he's unsure whether to visit Kaori or not. As much as he wants to see her, he doesn't know how he will act in front of her. In response, Ryuta encourages him, saying that he doesn't need to worry about that. What matters is that he at least visits her to keep her company, even if they don't talk. After hearing this, Kousei visits Kaori, and although she asks him many questions, he answers them coldly, which eventually annoys her. The protagonist explains that the coldness of his responses is because he doesn't know what to say. Kaori understands and agrees with him, saying, "Who would want to talk to someone who has been hospitalized for a long time and will probably never leave the hospital?" Kaori continues mentioning negative things about herself, leading Kousei to think that she's implying she might not make it out alive. For this reason, he gets angry with her and leaves the hospital, but not before telling her that he doesn't want to know anything more about her. The next day, our boy begs Nagi to let him participate in the school festival, to which she agrees without hesitation. But as a consequence of allowing him to perform with her, the girl spent days overworking herself on the piano, not only to defeat him at the festival, but also to impress him and everyone who would be at the event, as many important people, including the media, would attend. This overexertion caused her to become destabilized, leading to a mental crisis very similar to the one Kousei had when he was young and was forced to play the piano by his mother. When Hiroko noticed this in the girl, she didn't hesitate to hug her and let her know that while fear and paralysis are common among pianists due to nerves and anxiety, those feelings become secondary when on stage. In that moment, the pianist has two choices: to be a good protagonist or to be a bad one. With all this advice, Nagi feels relieved, but not entirely, as when the day of the school festival arrives, she is so nervous that her hands are trembling. When Kousei noticed this, he took her hands and told her that fear and nerves are normal, so he asked her to relax, as after all, it's just a festival and not a competition. After that, he comforts her by saying that a friend once told him that the important thing is to play with the heart and not with the mind, so that the music can touch everyone. Thanks to these words, Nagi changes her attitude and becomes confident, and together with Kousei, they head to the stage to give it their all. Nagi and Kousei's performance begins, and everything goes smoothly as they play without mistakes, keeping pace with each other while the audience watches intently. Mid-performance, Kousei picks up speed, playing faster and with more intensity, leaving Nagi behind. As a result, Kousei starts to take the spotlight, something Nagi is determined not to let happen. She quickens her pace as well, matching and even reaching the same level as him. Both of them continue to play with great passion. While Nagi plays to defeat Kousei and please her brother and friends, Kousei plays with the hope that his music will reach the most important person in his life, Kaori, who, despite being in the hospital, listens to Kousei's performance through a phone call from Ryuta. When the performance ends, the audience applauds energetically, chanting Nagi's name, which makes her very happy. The boy, on the other hand, doesn't care about the audience's reaction. His only concern is whether his music reached Kaori. Afterward, Nagi's friends rush to congratulate her, and shortly after, Takeshi appears to scold her for playing alongside his rival Kousei. This is when Takeshi, in a furious tone, warns Kousei to stay away from his sister, or else he will have to deal with him. The protagonist is confused as he had no idea that Nagi was Takeshi's sister, despite the fact that she had hinted at it indirectly. Nevertheless, in response to Takeshi's unexpected outburst, Kousei tells him that Nagi learned a lot from him, and he's glad that she has improved so much in her piano skills. This leaves Takeshi feeling useless, as he was never able to achieve that with his sister, so he leaves the scene completely humiliated. However, before departing, he warns Kousei that he will defeat him in the next competition. On a new day, our protagonist visits Kaori after after a long time. He came with the intention of talking to her and starts by answering the question she asked him some time ago. Would you take your life with me? Kousei can't take his life with her because it wouldn't be something they could do together, as he knows she is always one step ahead, making her very unpredictable. After explaining that he can't fulfill her request to take his life with her, the boy asks her to play the violin again as he misses her music. Upon hearing this, Kaori begins to cry because, although it may not seem like it, she misses playing with Kousei. However, it saddens her that she can't do so because her body is weakened from being constantly medicated and hospitalized. Even so, this also makes her smile because when she's with Kousei, regardless of the music, they always have fun and crazy moments together. At the hospital, the doctor reveals to Kaori that she has a severe illness and doesn't have much time left. However, she is given the option to undergo surgery that could potentially restore her to a normal life. With determination, she agrees to the operation for the sole reason of being able to play music with Kousei again. It was Kousei who reignited her hope in life when she was on the verge of giving up. As a result, she puts in great effort in the rehabilitation room, training her legs so she can return to performing alongside him. When Kousei sees her in this state, he is at a loss for what to think. Even though Kaori's parents have told him that she wants to undergo surgery to regain a normal life thanks to him, he doubts that he is truly the reason behind her decision. The following day at school, Tsubaki tells Kashiwagi that Kousei is performing poorly in all his subjects, which worries her deeply since his mind is entirely focused on the piano. In response, Kashiwagi explains that Kousei is doing what he feels is right. If he wants to get into a prestigious music high school, his grades don't matter as much as how well he plays the piano. If he wins the competition the next day, he would earn a direct pass to the music high school he so desires to attend. However, this frustrates Tsubaki because she doesn't want the person she loves to drift away from her. Despite this, she resolves to help him achieve this dream, trying to be less selfish so as not to act against Kousei's interests. On the day of the competition, our protagonist waits to be called for his performance. While waiting, Ami suddenly appears in front of him in an intimidating manner, leaving him unsure of how to react, so he simply offers her an egg sandwich he made. To his surprise, she is delighted by the sandwich, which makes him very happy. Shortly after, Takeshi joins them, so Kousei also offers him an egg sandwich, which he enjoys just as much. The three of them start to have a pleasant and friendly conversation, getting along surprisingly well despite being rivals. Then, Takeshi is called to the stage, and he has to leave, but not before reminding both Imai and Kousei that the competition between them is still on, and he will prove to be the best pianist in his performance. On stage, Takeshi showcases his incredible skill as a pianist, delivering a performance that captivates everyone. During the performance, he starts to overthink. Although he desires to be the best, surpassing both Imai and Kousei, he realizes that this desire is ultimately meaningless. After years of chasing this dream solely to defeat and Kousei, he understands that it's not worth it, as what truly matters is playing from the heart and striving to be better for oneself, not for others. Thus, when Takeshi finishes his performance and the audience applauds him, he leaves the stage to spend time with Imai and Kousei as friends, finally overcoming his rivalry with them, especially with Kousei, who he always wanted to defeat. The end of the school year is approaching, and all the students have received their report cards, which they can use to apply to the high school of their dreams. Tsubaki has very good grades despite not studying much. It turns out that she studied a lot in the last few months to get into an all-girls high school near the music high school that Kousei plans to attend. When she sets out to show her grades to Kousei, she can't find him anywhere, so she gives up. However, on another day, she runs into him leaving the hospital, so they decide to walk home together. On the way, it starts raining, forcing them to take shelter under a roof. While drinking orange juice, they have an interesting conversation because she noticed that he was leaving the hospital, so she asks if he had been visiting Kaori. He replies that he hadn't, as he planned to visit her, but since Ryuta was also there, he thought it best to leave them alone, knowing that Kaori is in love with Ryuta and not him, and when the three of them are together, he feels like a third wheel. Tsubaki doesn't believe him because she knows that he is in love with Kaori, and what really bothers him is having to see the girl he likes smile for and because of Ryuta. Because of this, Tsubaki is direct and asks him if he is in love with Kaori, to which he firmly responds that he is. This doesn't surprise Tsubaki at all, as she already knew. However, she gets very angry, to the point where she yells at him, telling him that Kaori will never notice him, and the best thing he can do is look at another girl like her, for example. This leaves Kousei stunned, as he never imagined that Tsubaki, his childhood friend, would ask him something like that. She feels embarrassed for having asked him such a thing, so to get out of the situation she put herself in, she kicks him hard in the leg and runs away, not only out of embarrassment, but also to make him suffer, as he made her suffer by ignoring her for music and Kaori. The next day, Tsubaki avoids Kousei every time she sees him, feeling ashamed for having hit him. She also feels embarrassed embarrassed for having asked him to notice her. Because of this, she vents all of her feelings by practicing baseball. On Kousei's side, all he can think about is Kaori, as it's been a while since he visited her. Every time he went, she treated him badly, yet at the same time, she begged him to visit her daily, leaving him very confused. On his way home, she calls him just to warn him that a plane is in the sky. This unexpected call made him realize that Kaori misses him despite always treating him badly when he visits her. That's why, with his head held high, he decides to visit her days later with Ryuta. Here, Kousei reveals to his friend that he is in love with Kaori, and that's why he never visited her, as he didn't want to be the third wheel. In response, Ryuta tells him that he already knew and that he doesn't have to worry about anything since he doesn't plan to lose his friendship over a girl. As they approach Kaori's room, the nurses rush in with great tension as Kaori is going through a tough moment due to her illness. From outside, Kousei saw Kaori's body slowly fading, which caused him great concern as he couldn't bear to lose her. To make things more tragic, as Kousei leaves the hospital, he witnesses a cat by a car, and despite rushing it to the vet, it was already too late. This caused the boy great sadness as he fears that the same fate awaits Kaori, meaning her departure from this world. Kaori's health left Kousei in complete sadness, and today he didn't attend classes. Tsubaki is worried about him, but since she can't do much because she's at odds with him, she asks Hiroko to go to his house. Since Kousei doesn't answer the phone, Hiroko is forced to enter his house by force. When she finds him, she sees him in a very low emotional state, and no matter how hard she tries to motivate him to play the piano, he refuses as he doesn't find any reason to play again. On a new school day, the protagonist finds a letter for him from Kaori. The letter says, "I want to eat sweets." Knowing what she means, he visits her in the hospital, carrying some bags of sweets for her. Kaori gets excited about the sweets, and her excitement is so great that she asks him for one more favor, to take her to the hospital's rooftop. The boy gladly obliges, and once they arrive, she asks if he is still playing the piano. He replies that he is not because he has no reason to keep playing since he plays for important people in his life, but now those people are no longer with him. Kaori knows that one of those people is her, so to return his motivation, she lets him know that she will never leave his side because in a couple of days she will undergo surgery, and if everything goes well, she will have her old life back and would like to spend it with him. These words move the protagonist. However, he doesn't feel capable of playing the piano again after having stopped for so long. In response, Kaori shows him that it is not necessary to play music every day to be the best. It is enough to express feelings while playing. Kaori plays an imaginary violin, demonstrating her point to Kousei, and luckily for her, her music reaches him. However, after finishing playing, she collapses to the ground and clings to Kousei, tearfully exclaiming that she is afraid of the future because she doesn't know if her operation will be successful. Later, while Kaori is undergoing surgery, Amai is giving her performance in the final competition. She impresses everyone, as her performance is so good that there is no doubt it is on the same level as Takeshi's. After this, it's the protagonist's turn, but he is paralyzed by the fear of not being able to play due to the sadness he feels inside, just as happened when he was a child. Despite this, he decides to play, as no sadness is stronger than the promise he made to Kaori. In this way, the protagonist begins his performance with the piece Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Op. 23, starting softly and sadly, then pouring all his emotions into the piano. The boy remembers all his loved ones, Ryuta, Hiroko, Tsubaki. He also recalls the interesting and friendly moments he shared with Nagi, Takeshi, and Imai. But above all, he remembers the person he loves most in the world, Kaori, who was the only one who reignited his desire to play the piano after being traumatized by his mother. As Kousei plays the piano, the whole stage becomes beautiful as a great sakura tree appears, and everyone can see it because he is expressing his deepest feelings from the bottom of his heart, something everyone can notice in his performance. The downside is that these feelings are of deep sadness and pain, as if he were expressing the of an important person in his life. Without giving it much importance, Kousei keeps playing while reminiscing about all the moments he shared with his friends. He hopes that his performance will reach Kaori's heart, who is currently undergoing surgery. In the midst of his performance, Kousei enters into a sort of astral journey where Kaori appears to him to play alongside him. In this way, Kousei continues his performance with Kaori, and the two appear very happy and content. Suddenly, Kaori stops playing and says goodbye to Kousei. This worries him, and he becomes sad because after Kaori's farewell, she begins to fade away before his eyes, which means she has left this world. As a result, Kousei finishes his performance with tears in his eyes and deep sadness. The next day, at Kaori's funeral, her parents hand a letter to Kousei. This letter reveals to him that, like many other pianists, Kaori had admired him since she was a child, and he was her inspiration to become a musician, hoping that one day he would play alongside her. In the letter, Kaori also expresses that she was very happy they were in the same school, but couldn't speak much with him due to his closeness with Tsubaki and Ryuta. She explains explains that, in April, she told a lie, and that is that she was in love with Ryota. She said this lie to get closer to Kousei, which means she had always been in love with him. Now, knowing that Kaori loved him, Kousei reaffirms his vow to never forget her by continuing to play the piano. On the other hand, Ryota continues his habit of dating many girls, but even though these girls bring him fun moments, he can only think of Kaori. Tsubaki, knowing that Kousei had lost another person he loved, vows never to leave him alone no matter what happens. In response to this promise, Kousei smiles slightly because, although it makes him happy to have someone who cares so much for him, he will have to endure the pain of facing spring without Kaori. OVA 1. Revisiting the past, we see young Kousei, Tsubaki, and Ryuta arriving at Tower Hall, where our young boy is about to give his performance in that year's competition. We also see a young Ime, accompanied by her parents. She appears disinterested in being there, as it seems she was forced by her family to attend. During the competition presentations, Ime looks bored to the point of almost falling asleep. Fortunately, this doesn't happen, as when Kousei begins his performance, the girl wakes up and shows great interest in the boy's presentation, as it allows her to imagine herself in a beautiful field surrounded by sunflowers. When the boy finishes his performance, Ime starts crying, leading her family to leave the venue. After this, Ime is determined to make a big decision, to become a pianist, as Kousei's performance made her realize that this is what she wants to be when she grows up, not only to impress others but also, more than anything, to surpass the boy. That's why she decided to participate in a new piano competition at Tower Hall, knowing that Kousei would also participate. She tries to distract the boy to make him lose concentration, but despite her efforts, Kousei simply ignores her. Another boy, Takeshi, also joins in to bother Kousei. Like Imi, Takeshi was impressed by Kousei's performance in the previous competition, which motivated him to practice piano to become as good as or better than him. The problem is that despite Takeshi's extensive practice, he fails to reach Kousei's level. Therefore, he decides to do something unusual, follow him secretly to his home to find out how to play the piano like him. Although this plan initially seems successful, he soon realizes that it isn't bearing fruit, as once Kousei locked himself in his room, all he did was practice piano keys repetitively for over an hour. This leaves Takeshi demotivated, so he returns home to continue practicing in his own way. Weeks pass, and in every new competition, Kousei always comes out as the winner, which greatly frustrates Takeshi. At the same time, he discovers that there is someone else who plays almost at Kousei's level, Imai. Despite not following the sheet music, her performances are so good that they leave the entire audience happy. Takeshi thought Imai would be another rival to defeat, but in a brief interaction with her, he learns that she also wants to compete against Kousei, so in the end, they have something in common despite some misunderstandings. A final competition arrives, where Kousei, as usual, performs well, securing first place and advancing to the final round. Ami, on the other hand, couldn't make it to the final stage due to her obsession with surpassing the boy, which caused her to injure her hand and consequently abandon both the competition and her dream of becoming a pianist. She and Takeshi talk about this, and she tells him that she won't give up her dream of being a pianist. As soon as she recovers, she plans to return to practicing piano. He tells her not to overexert herself, and while saying this, teases her by suggesting she doesn't seem to want to defeat Kousei, but rather to impress him so he will notice her. These words obviously irritate Amy, so she tells Takeshi that when her hand heals, she will make him eat his words. Just then, the protagonist arrives, causing the two to fall silent. The boy sits between them and looks at a magazine. As he does so, his face changes. He smiles as he reads that his mother will come to visit him for the final round of the competition.